It says we're live,
Okay.
and we're watching our guest drive through the hills and trees of northeastern Mississippi. He's
How's it
gonna
going?
he's chasing a cirrus cloud,
I'm hoping to chase them away later tonight so we can see this
the
this
meteor
meteor
storm.
shower or
Yeah,
storm. Yeah, it could be a meteor storm. Hopefully.
yeah. We're supposed to have high clouds here because we're getting all the cloud debris from storms well west of us, and it keeps. I mean, this frontal system has been just slowly sagging south, and then it's going to slowly come back north again, and we're going to get. Oh, it's going to be annoying when we have these disorganized storms. It's similar to what happens in the south. You've been down there enough now that you've gotten used to afternoon storms again.
Again. You know what's kind of funny is the hardest thing for even people that have lived here their whole life to get used to is, wait, these storms are moving from the southeast to the northwest? That's weird. Yet it happens for about 2 weeks every summer where the high just positions itself just right. You get those easterly waves, and oh look, retrograding high. Here go those storms. So
And
it's
then of course you have tropical storms, and you're lucky you haven't gotten into that yet or have you down there
well,
yet?
the only one that we've got the remnants when we had, was it Hurricane Isaac or Tropical Storm Isaac? I'll be perfectly honest. I've always been a severe weather nut growing up in Kansas, but tropical
Yeah.
storms, yeah, six of one, half dozen another. I don't care as much for them, so I can't remember. I just remember it was Isaac, and when Isaac hit, we were in just the right spot where 4 days later, as it I think circled up through Missouri and kind of came back around, we had tornado warnings from that a few days later. So
Yeah.
we've had a little bit, but fortunately not a lot. And
And there
apparently my
goes the camera. This
sorry about that.
Evidently the Mississippi Department of Transportation needs to fix the roads. Unless you're in the city still, then the city of Tupelo needs to fix the roads.
No, this is the road I'm driving on to get to my house is actually one of the oldest paved roads in this part of the state. Now it's been paved over, but the original roadway was basically one lane in the middle, and
Uh-oh.
so basically there's cracks where you can see where the original pavement was for the one lane in the middle, and where they just over time just added to the sides.
Yeah.
So that leads to road deterioration.
Yeah. Well, we'd actually this is actually the pre-show portion, but we might as well just keep talking because
Okay.
we're but we can start with your lovely childhood in Russell, Kansas, because I looked that up.
Yeah. So Russell is known for only a couple of things. It's known for oil. There was a lot of oil money. We didn't have any. It's known for being the hometown of U.S. Senator Bob Dole and oil inspector. We actually had two U.S. senators from my hometown of like 3,500 people at one time. And then at that same time, we actually had both of them running for president briefly at the same time. And then Bob Dole became the Republican nominee back in 1996. And so those are the two main things. The third thing that we have out there are a lot of storms, a lot of tornadoes. And I actually lived across the street from a tornado siren, lived catty corner of the tornado sirens. So from an early age,
And there went Matt's cell service. He lived
can,
catty
can
corner
come
from a.
from this.
Okay, we lost you for a
Yeah,
little bit. Keep
I'm
going.
sorry. I'm sorry. So I lived catty corner from a tornado siren. And so long before I realized what the siren was for, I just knew that loud noise scared me, and we had to run into the dark, creepy basement every time it went off. And so then I realized, oh, wait, these whirlwinds of fingers of swirling death can come and try to get me. And that's what that siren's for? Great. So from a really early age, I was actually kind of scared of tornadoes. And so it made me really interested in learning more about them. I remember they used to have something on the Weather Channel called the Weather Classroom.
Yeah.
And my mom sent off for the book, and they sent the book back, and it was signed by all sorts of folks, including, oddly enough, Jim Cantori. This is before we realized Jim Cantori was going to become the superstar spokesman for the industry.
Yeah.
You know, and they're like, yeah, keep on, you know, trying to grow and be a meteorologist one day. I'm like, okay. So I was always really interested in weather growing up, and I got all the way to high school, and I decided what I'm going to do for the rest of my life is be a lawyer. Part of that,
Oh.
I think, was the Bob Dole thing, you know, and the run for president thing. So I eventually became, golly, these roads. The portion I'm going past right now, I'm going to take this off for a second, just to finish that discussion. You might see behind me there how there's like a strip in the middle.
Yeah.
Most of the road doesn't look like that, but they left that one strip exposed just to kind of show people what the road looked like. So that was the original first paved road in this part of the state. A long, long time ago, and I drive over that every day on my way home. Anyway, back to the original thing. I decided I was going to become a lawyer. I got to college. I failed my Spanish entrance exam. I had taken 2 years of Spanish, failed it. And so I was like, yeah, this isn't good. College scares me. You know, coming from a small town, there were more people in my college than there were in my hometown by a lot.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, what majors don't require a foreign language? And I came across meteorology. I was like, sold. Nobody tells you your foreign language is math. So there's that
Well,
tidbit.
the interesting thing is nobody told you either that what would happen if you had to do the weather in a heavily Hispanic area that speaks a lot of Spanish.
That's the crazy part about it. You know, and I don't think about that as much now, but early on in my career, you'd look at these jobs for Telemundo in Dallas, you know, no experience required. I'm like, if only I had taken Spanish on top of meteorology, I'd be in Dallas right out of college. Which, when you think about it, is kind of scary, because Dallas sees tornadoes, and you're like, God, I would be, if I look back at me coming out of college trying to cover a tornado, like, that's a liability, you know, when it comes right down to it. But, you know, I mean, that's kind of fun, kind of the weird twist on it.
And you'd probably start going from Spanish to English really fast, going crazy if you saw a tornado.
Oh, absolutely. Right out of college, your brain just goes, woo. You know, it's you know, it's like tornado, you know. And so I don't even know what the Spanish word for tornado is. I probably should. We actually have an increasing Hispanic population here. There's more and more migrant workers. There's sweet potato crops and other crops around here, and so it would benefit me to know a little bit of Spanish, just you know, if all I said was one line, you know, tornado bad, take shelter. I think they probably get it with all the red and all the excitement going on, but to actually say it in their native language would probably be beneficial.
If I remember, I think tornado is a Spanish word, but it doesn't mean tornado. If I remember right, somebody can email you or email me or email us.
Yeah.
Because if I remember, I think it has to do something about wind or severe wind or some such thing. But
I think you're I don't think you're out in left field on that. I think there's some accuracy to that.
Yeah, it's either that or it's Latin. I don't think you'd need to learn that.
Tornado. I don't know. That's a really good question.
Given that you were in Texas for so many years, especially with a lot of Hispanics out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, go ahead.
Now I'm going to have to probably get out the Google Translate to find out if that's actually it.
I know. I'm a little. My boss actually asked me just yesterday, like, are you a little OCD? I'm like, yeah, sometimes about things like that. I'd be a lot more OCD if I had more time. Hold on just a second. How's it going? Well, hi, Camden. Remember I said kids? Welcome to Mississippi. Do you remember the last time you were here? Well, welcome back. Golly, I almost didn't recognize you. You've gotten so big. I'm 4. God, you're 4. I remember when you were really small. Oh, yeah, pull real hard. There we go. Apologize. Say hi to Camden.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. I'm actually doing a little web chat with somebody on weather stuff. So hold on just a second.
Oh, brother.
I saw you
Hi.
on.
Say hi, Matt. I'm doing a webcast talking about weather stuff. So I'm probably going to go upstairs or on the back porch. So I'll see you in just a minute. Sorry about that.
Well, it couldn't get much worse. We're forthright and crazy, but now we
I
get
know.
to see the inside of your house, oh brother.
It's one of the crazy things about it. If you want to go, you can. Yeah. If you want, yeah. Okay, I'll see you a little later. I want to make sure that we're on Wi-Fi. Okay, we're on Wi-Fi. I want to make sure that we had a good connection.
Okay.
Some of her stuff was in there.
Okay.
I went ahead and put the book and the pen and that stuff in there on the shelf.
Okay.
So, and she sleep. She didn't sleep hardly maybe 20 minutes earlier.
Okay.
And then when she's went down now, she's been
My
asleep
baby
since
daughter.
5:45.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
So
I appreciate it.
I have it already in the fridge for the next meeting at 7.
Okay. Sweet. Thank you. Hi, I'm doing a webcast, so I'll talk to you in just a little bit. Okay. Okay. So, and I'll be better lit here in just a second. Some of the craziness of how everything happened, I know we'll talk a lot more about the tornado here in a minute, but some of the craziness related to that is we actually closed on the purchase of a different house 2 days after the tornado and did the walkthrough the day after. And so our house is still a mess, so our friends came down to help us do some unpacking.
Yeah, so you're likely going to be staying in Tupelo for quite some time.
We hope to. One of the cool things about the station here is that it's a locally owned TV station, and there really aren't a whole lot of those left out there. Yeah. And it's something we value very highly. You know, I mean, 2 days. I'm sure you've talked to TV Mets before, and they talk a lot about sweeps. You know, like there are 4 sweeps months a year. That you know, I mean, it's basically no vacation, all hands on deck. A couple days after the tornado, my general manager came in and said, "Hey, listen, you need to take off the next couple of days." I'm like, okay. And I came in the next day, and he got real mad at me. He's like, "I told you to take off." I'm like, "But it's sweeps. We need to." He's like, "A dead hero does nobody any good." I'm like, I hadn't thought about it like that, but it was one of those things that I was just so stressed to the max that he looked at me and he said, "Yeah, I know there are viewers that are going to be tuning in to watch you, but I'd much rather have you in better health than, you know, just going 90-0." And there's not a lot of places where management would do that, so it's a really great place. We really, really like the station.
Yeah, I know in my market, because I'm in the eastern part of Iowa, there's one. Mm-hmm. It's the only one in Iowa.
Yeah.
There's a lot of them are conglomerates and big station groups, and you worked at one of them at the 2 stations you worked at in Lubbock. You had the big group. You can talk about your time there after the fact that you first went to the University of Kansas. That means I don't like you.
I know. Hold on. Are you Iowa State?
I went to Iowa State.
Okay. I've never had a problem with Iowa State. I would not mind it if Missouri fell off into the ocean. You know, I mean. I
took a Met class online from Missouri, but.
Oh, okay. Well, now I don't like you. You know, it's okay. At least you didn't set foot in Columbia. You know, my pronunciation of the state Missouri is misery. You know, it's all in the emphasis. So when we're driving home to see family who lives up near Kansas City now, I'm like, we spend our entire trip in misery. But yeah, I'm sorry, I completely messed up your timeline. This is what happens. I'm a little ADHD, and it's Friday at the end of sweeps, so I apologize.
Yeah, and you did your internship in Kansas City.
Yes, I did. I did it with KMBC, the ABC affiliate there under Brian Busby, and you know, when you're interning, and you know this, when you're young, you know everything, and I knew I didn't know everything, and I was absorbing so much, and I just think back now, all the things I could have learned and I learned a lot, but all the things I really could have learned if I knew what I was trying to learn, as crazy as that sounds.
Yeah. And then there was that resume tape that's on YouTube. You put it on YouTube.
You know, I put that on YouTube. One of the cool things about Mississippi, and a lot of people make fun of Mississippi, and some people make fun of, you know, the meteorologist coming out of Mississippi State within the field. But I'll tell you this, one of the awesome things about living in Mississippi is the quantity of meteorologists, broadcast meteorologists in particular, that come out of Mississippi State, and to be able to mentor those people. I put that on because I went to talk to them about in their AMS chapter earlier this year, and I wanted to show that, hey, listen, no matter where you get to in your career, we all started about the same level. Here's my first resume tape. What do you think about that? I went through and I ripped it to pieces. I was like, I hate that. I shouldn't have done that. That was wrong. I may or may not have hired myself if I came out of school today, based upon that tape, just to kind of show them where it came from. And Mississippi State really cranks out some pretty good meteorologists.
Yeah.
A lot better than I thought before I moved here, to be 100% honest.
And that does help for the fact that you're in a market where there is such a good school that's bringing out all these broadcast meteorologists.
Absolutely. For us, it really affords us the ability to start folks, a lot of people's, a lot of meteorologists' career. So we have a weekend morning position that we created a little bit after I came here, and for this size market we essentially have 5 meteorologists on staff. One that's a fill-in, who's the guy who's the chief meteorologist before I got here. So he's basically retired, but he comes and does fill-in stuff for us. And then we have the typical 3 mornings, evenings, and weekends. And then we have a weekend morning position that then we can, put in for filling in other times. And to be able to have, typically it's been a junior or a first-year grad student in that position. It's been really pretty cool to be able to, see these kids as they develop, and then they go on to much, much bigger things. One of the people, the first person is chief now in a market in South Alabama. The second one is up in, I think, Traverse City, Michigan. Third one's going to be graduating here or just graduated, so he's in the process of doing a lot of job applications and looking in Texas and all over the place. So it's been really cool to kind of see these people as their careers have launched from here. But to be able to kind of pick from the best of the best, which is kind of cool.
And then from that awful resume tape, you did get hired, but that was 10 years ago. So back
blows
then,
my mind.
back then, resume tapes could look that bad.
Yeah,
and still
absolutely.
Get there, and you could still get a job in a decent-sized market as Lubbock is.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what's really pretty cool about the whole deal is that back then it was literally a tape, and you had one. The only way I was able to get a tape together is I had to go at the TV station, and we had to get their director and the sound operator and everyone there to put together the tape, and you basically got 1 or 2 takes, and if one of those 2 takes wasn't good, well, you were going to live with it. So I was lucky to get the good take that I got at that point. And now talking with these kids at State, they have a weather wall there on campus. They could record 20 takes in one day if they wanted to. It's unbelievable when you think about it, the opportunities they have. So it's kind of cool. And I got some job offers there was actually one in Kansas and one in upstate New York and out in Maryland. There were quite a few folks that I talked to before I settled on Lubbock. I don't know what it was. I think it was the lure of the LP supercell tornadoes that they get out there in Texas. You can't resist that. It's perfect chasing territory. So that's why we went there originally. I went there originally, I guess.
Yeah, and you were there at the 2 stations that are pretty much co-owned by the same group, more or less.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think technically there's a different owner, but they're definitely managed by the same crew there.
Yeah.
And I was there for 7 years. I spent 3 years on the morning show on one station, and then 4 years as the chief on the other one. And the crazy thing about it, Lubbock, we intended on staying in Lubbock. My wife's from Lubbock. She was an anchor at the TV station there. I think we'll talk a little more about that here in a minute. But we never really had an intent to leave Lubbock. It was, my wife's family was a mile and a half down the road. That's pretty convenient in this business, just to be able to go down there just for Christmas, Thanksgiving. It was easy to do one holiday with my parents and one holiday with theirs. It was really, really easy. So we actually never really intended to leave Lubbock, and then we did.
Well, was there any real active times when you were in Lubbock, or was it kind of dead quiet? I know you have several videos on your YouTube page, but it's kind of boring. And was it what you expected it was going to be during your time there?
While I was there, it was. There's been this persistent drought, and the drought really kicked into high gear while we were there. We had 1 year where we went 100+ days without even any kind of measurable rainfall. Longest stretch on record while I was there. But we also had a day where we had, I think, 99 tornado warnings. We had a stationary front that parked over top of northern Lubbock County, and it was tornado warning after tornado warning. I was in a secondary role at that point. We had a lot of great northwest flow storms. The storms they get out there, though, there haven't been a ton of tornado touchdowns. We had a few tornado touchdowns there, and I feel blessed that we didn't have more of those that ended up being killer tornadoes. I think there was only one person, fortunately, only one person in my 7 years there that died from tornadoes. But we had a bunch of people that would die from blowing dust. These storms would kick out an outflow with 60-mile-an-hour winds and the blowing dust, and they'd drive into the dust and get into a car wreck. But my car sits out front here with baseball-size hail dents, and I was fortunate to be at the station. My first big break covering severe weather was actually middle of the night baseball-size hail event. Everyone, not middle of the night, but like early, like 5 o'clock in the morning, and everyone wakes up in town, and the other station's off the air, and I was the only one on. And I looking back, I don't know that they wanted me to go on, but I knew we needed to go on, and so I'm like, no, we're going on. You can yell at me later, but this is big stuff. We need to go on. And we went on, and then we did 2 or 3 hours of wall-to-wall coverage, and that was my first big break, if you want to put it like that. But we had quite a few days where we had a lot of close calls on tornadoes. We had a couple significant tornadoes, one that moved through Olton, Mississippi, and then eventually hit Olton, Texas, and eventually hit Tulia. So this is what happens. You work really hard when you're in one of these markets to learn all these names, and then when you leave, you mess up the names forever. And then I have to get to the point where I scrub all the old names out of my brain so that all the new names fit. So we had some pretty good storms there, but fortunately none that hit Lubbock. Lubbock County was very fortunate that while I was there we didn't have any tornadoes. And I think my chief there, whose name's Ron Roberts, I think he always said it best, it's only a matter of time till the next one.
And then it got to the point you decided to leave Lubbock.
Well,
we can after that point we'll go back to how you met Emily. We'll get personal, but
so the weird thing, and it's weird on a science show to say something of faith. So I apologize if that's a direction you don't want to go. But I need to go down a path of faith because that's the only reason why we left. We really felt like God was saying we needed to move to Mississippi, and I'm not a person prior to this. I wasn't the person that would do professions of faith. That's just not me. That's something I kind of kept to myself. But it was just so weird. 2 days after Christmas, we got a email from Tupelo, Mississippi, from the TV station here, wanting to know if we were interested. At this point, we weren't looking. My contract was coming up about 6 months out. I had put together a tape, but I had sent it to a headhunting agency, but I hadn't really done the full court press, let's look for a job. So this was way earlier than I expected someone to contact me. And it was 2 days after Christmas, and my wife had one of those moments where she was like, am I ever going to move up here? What are we doing? And so we got this message from Tupelo. I told her, and she's like, we're not moving to Mississippi. I'm like, okay. And so we went through the whole process of the interview. And the first interview I had with the station here, I was on the phone with the news director for an hour and a half. So it was a really good conversation, and I really liked the guy. And in a lot of ways, I came here because of him, because I thought he was amazing. He's moved on. He's in Birmingham now, working at 3340 as assistant news director. His name's Jeff Houston. He's an amazing guy. In a lot of ways, we came here partially because he was a great sell. But the way God ties into this is we would have a bad day, and I get an email from Jeff. All of a sudden, Tupelo's popping up on the national scene. And so it comes time, my next interview, I talk to the general manager and news director. It's 2 hours. The interview after that, it's the owner, general manager, and news director, on the phone call. And it's another 2-hour conversation. And we flew here basically for my wife's 30th birthday. Which, you know, where else would you want to go for your 30th birthday? Not like that's a big deal to a woman at all. So we flew here basically for the 30th birthday, and we got snowed in to where we couldn't leave. And so we had to stay an extra day. And as we're driving back to fly out from Memphis, my wife looks up at the clouds and she says, I wish that we would just get a sign. You know, just, I know God's pushing us to do this, but, and it's her hometown, so it's hard for her to leave her hometown. She'd never lived more than like 40 miles away from her parents. And so we get back, and we'd had some snow in Lubbock, and I'm a control freak. Some control freaks can admit it. I'll admit it. I'm a control freak. And so it was really hard for me to be away when we had a snow event. And so I got back in. I got my stuff together. I had to work the day we flew back. And I go down to talk to my general manager, say, hey, you know, we had a really good trip. What do you guys think? And on my way to his office, we got our sign. We were doing a promotion for our morning meteorologist, and we actually had a picture of her holding a sign that, you know, had our station's call letters on it, and it was a full-size cutout. I looked at that and I thought, you know, this station will be okay if we end up leaving. And so I sent that picture to my wife, and she said, we're moving to Tupelo. And so we moved here. We sold our house in less than 3 weeks. We put our house on the market, sold our house in less than 3 weeks for more money than we bought it for in the bottom of the housing crisis. We moved here, bought a house for the exact same price, 2 minutes away from work, you know, and my wife was able to find work here very quickly at the TV station. She's now our main anchor, one of our main evening anchors. And just everything really, really fell into place. And you can say that's all coincidence, and I'll respect that opinion. As a scientist, I have to say it is entirely possible it's all coincidence, or that's just a little bit too convenient. And so I felt like God really pushed us here. And then April, 27th, 2011 happens less than 2 weeks after I got on the air. I'm like, well, maybe that's why he was pushing so hard. On a very selfish way, I thought that. It's just, it was a very emotional, short period of time that's like, if you don't believe in God, I don't know how you explain it,
And the one thing is, and we'll get back to with about Emily, but then you were there, and that wasn't the only outbreak. There was the one on April 15th that everybody, was that right like the first couple of days, or was that
15th was a Friday, I think, right? I think
yes, the 15th is Friday.
15th was my first full day on the air. So my first I did the 9 o'clock show the night before, and they kind of had me on interviewing me saying, here's the guy. My first full day on the air was 15th. Yeah, so we did, I remember we did like 2 hours of the coverage just on storms circulating over Starkville. We fortunately, I don't think, had any touchdowns on the 15th. It was all closer to Jackson, but yeah, that was a lot of coverage the first day on the air. And it was crazy. And then we had there was another like mini outbreak in there, and then you had the multi-day 27th, 26th, 27th.
Yeah, that's more or less saying, welcome to Tupelo.
Oh my God. By the end, people are like, we think you do a great job, but you can take this weather back with you to Texas. I'm like, I hear you. It was really kind of crazy. I replaced a guy who's, I think it was 73 at the time, 73 or 74.
Yeah, Dick Rice.
Yeah, I don't remember how old he was at the time. I need to know that fact. And people did not like me. I was very different than Dick. And Dick is a sweet man. I love Dick like a grandfather. Like, he's amazing. Like, I really think he's an amazing man. And to be in this market for 32 years like he was before, after, coming out of the Navy and doing it, like, I firmly believe that gave us some viewership that still to this day hopefully allows us to save lives, because I learned in Texas really quickly that building from the ground up is difficult no matter how good or not good you are at your job. A lot of TV and a lot of ratings, a lot of your reach has to do with the shoulders of the people you're standing on before. And Dick did a great job for a lot of years, and so I was very different than Dick. And so there was a lot of negative response, not necessarily from our severe weather coverage, but just in general, because my day-to-day was different. And I'm coming out the gate saying, this is going to be bad stuff. We have big tornadoes, And basically the first time most people saw me was in the lead up to, the build up to the 27th, as I'm going, 90-0 saying this is bad, bad, bad stuff coming. And people don't know that I'm not usually like that. Like, I like to downplay unless I'm convinced it's going to be really bad. I intentionally and have discussions with folks at the station. I'm going to come up below this. Last day before, I'm going to ratchet up if necessary. If it looks like it's not going to be widespread tornadoes, I'll play it like that, or it doesn't look like I could have long track tornadoes. So people didn't understand I'm coming out hard, and that's not the way I usually am.
Yeah.
So they're like, this guy's just full of it and full of himself. And it was hard on my wife. She was back in Texas reading all these Facebook comments. People hated me and wanted me to go away and bring back Dick. And then the 27th happens, and it was this immediate, change. They're like, oh, there was a reason why he was saying all that, and it was very humbling.
So that was pretty much the turnaround, and that only happened in 2 weeks. So you're lucky something like that happened, or they would probably still hate you.
We figured that I don't know if they would still hate me, but it would have taken, we figured, a solid year to get to where we were 2 weeks later. Your best case scenario, a solid year. It might have taken longer, because you would have risked those folks changing the channel to the competition, because at least he was familiar. I wasn't familiar, and so we figured it did at least a year's worth of branding in 2 weeks, which, granted, we would have traded in a heartbeat for the 27th to not happen. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just it was an incredibly bad outbreak, but it was fortunate for the station and what the image we were trying to promote.
Now we can talk about April 27th in full detail of
Okay.
what happened in Mississippi, because we've had James Spann on. We had Jason Simpson, who's now up in Huntsville.
Mm-hmm.
So we know all about Alabama. We're so Alabama'd out of April 27th. And I know you cover a couple of the counties there, but talk about April 27th from your point of view in Mississippi, because you had nasty tornadoes there too, and you had storms that morning and into the early afternoon in the northern part of the area, I think north of where Interstate 22 was. So you can discuss all that.
Yeah, so 27th, that just day and a half, 2 days was so crazy. The night before, I'll be honest, I don't remember a whole lot of like a couple days before. I just remember we did a lot of coverage, but it wasn't a lot of production. But the morning before, basically the 27th pre-dawn, I was in from the night before still until like 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning, and we had what frankly looked like a hurricane on radar. We had an EF3 tornado that went through Webster County, and it destroyed East Webster High School. It fortunately didn't hit a whole lot of homes because the area is very rural. But that storm, I mean, looked like a hurricane on radar. It was unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it before. And it had one of the crazy things about that, I almost talk about that more than I talk, if you're personally asking me as opposed to just asking me questions, I'll talk more about this storm than I probably will the one that went through Smithville or Hackleburg, Phil Campbell, or the Philadelphia tornado, any of those, is because, I'm sorry, you're still getting my audio? I had something weird pop up.
Yeah, it cut out for a little bit, but you're still fine.
Okay, I'm sorry. One of the most interesting tornadoes to me is this overnight tornado, because it carved a damage path along. There's a northeast to southwest roadway that goes through our viewing area called the Natchez Trace Parkway. It's actually a national park, but it's a road. There's about a 10 or 12 mile swath of this, and it's nothing but trees on the side that's just broken to sticks. Because not only did you have the EF3 tornado, but you had a swath of the RFD winds wrapping around it at probably 100 plus miles per hour. On radar, I think it codes in at closer to 120. And you're looking aloft in the thunderstorm, but you're not way up there in the thunderstorm. So you had this huge swath of 100 plus mile per hour winds and just chopped these trees off at, 30 feet above the ground. It is the most surreal tornado damage I've ever been in. Not because it's the worst, but because of just the massive swath of damage associated with it. Part of it's because the storm tracked from southwest to northeast. But part of it's because it's just that large of swath of damage. It's unreal. It's unbelievable. So that was a heck of a way to start off the day. We had that, and we knew it was bad, and that was a long track tornado. And then I remember taking a shower prior to going into work, and I will never forget this the rest of my life. I look up at the shower head, and I think to myself, there's got to be a way this doesn't end up being that bad. Like there's got to be a way that I'm blowing this out of proportion in my head. I'm like, I can't think of a single way this isn't going to be absolutely horrible. And I called my boss. I was like, this is going to be extremely bad. And, he knew me because we've been talking. It was a really long hiring process. They talked to me in December. I obviously didn't start until April. So the hiring process for getting this job was extremely long because they wanted the right candidate, I guess. And so he didn't, like, it was just one of those things. We didn't have the kind of established relationship where he knew, okay, what's this guy mean? Is this guy blowing it out of proportion? But it was just one of those moments. It was just like I talked to him, and it's like, this is going to be extremely bad, and then storms start popping, and it's big supercells everywhere. And we had somewhat of a Twitter presence, but people around here didn't know me on Twitter. They knew my morning meteorologist, Jennifer Watson, who's now at the Weather Channel producing stuff there. And they knew a little bit about John, and we fortunately had an established brand for our WTVA news for our Twitter product there, but we didn't have a huge Facebook presence. I didn't have a Facebook page, really hardly at all here at that point, So I mean, there's it, and the unfortunate thing, and I'm sure they talked about this, the morning storms knocking out power. We had power disruptions that then affected people in the afternoon. It was just the only word that comes to mind is you just had this feeling of helplessness. You really felt helpless that that these were bad, they were getting worse. You hoped everyone could hear you. It's just do the best you can. I'd handled a lot of thunderstorms when we were in Texas. I'd done a lot of wall-to-wall coverage. We would go wall-to-wall in Lubbock for severe thunderstorm warnings if it was impacting the city. So there were a lot of severe thunderstorm wall-to-wall situations that we'd handled. So I covered a lot of thunderstorms. But I have never felt more overwhelmed than on that day. You're just like, okay, well, let's spend 2 minutes talking about this storm, and we know it's probably causing damage and could kill you, but I got to go to another storm. I'm sorry. And you felt helpless that now I'm going to leave these people dangling as we go to the next one. Obviously, the big tornado, I mean, I still believe, and it's just the way people in Mississippi are, that there are tornadoes that didn't get reported, damage surveys that didn't get done from that day. The crazy thing relating to the 2014 outbreak that we had here is there was one tornado that was tracking toward the station. Fortunately, it pulled a little north and west. I think back, and that's part of the reason I think we sheltered this time, is I thought after the fact, going back and thinking through everything that happened, I thought if that had held together and that had turned right, and those are two things that easily could have happened that day, that we could have been hit at the station and probably would have been very unprepared. And so that's part of what got us to the stage of preparedness, but that's a different discussion.
Yeah.
But I mean, the long track, Chickasaw County, and then which is a storm that actually almost knocked us off the air before the Smithville EF5 ever formed. That tornado formed pretty much over top of our tower. Our broadcast tower is actually 45 miles southwest of our station. And so we have a microwave dish on our station that sends our signal down to our main broadcast tower. And as it's forming, it actually bent the bolts. The bolts are, about yay big around. It bent the bolts and made it to where the dish was a little bit off kilter and almost knocked us off the air. So looking back, we're incredibly fortunate we even stayed on the air. But that tornado formed there, caused a lot of damage in Chickasaw County. I believe that if there had been more well-built homes that qualified, that probably would have been an EF5 tornado in Chickasaw County. But the structures it hit, it's not exactly an affluent county, and so the structures it hit weren't always up to code. Some of them were, many of them weren't. And then ultimately it produces the Smithville tornado, pretty much wiping the town off the north side of town in particular off the map. I mean, it was just I've been through Greensburg, Kansas after that, and that was worse than what happened in Smithville, simply because of the width of that tornado. Smithville's was a little more narrow, and so that helped it out. But still a bad tornado. And then you had Hackleburg, Phil Campbell. And if there's a regret I have from that day, I feel like we paid attention to Hackleburg, Phil Campbell. I think that because I was so new to the market, we didn't pay enough attention to those. And technically, both of those fall in. One of them falls in, Birmingham's DMA, and another one falls in Huntsville's. And that's one of the hidden problems with this. When you fall kind of covered by so many different markets like that, who do the people, number one, know to tune to? And where do we put our effort and our priority, and we were really concentrating on some other storms at that point, and I mean, we did our best, and that's the unfortunate thing of that day is you could really only do your best. It's very easy on that day to go back and say, we could have done better. I don't feel like that with this 2014. I felt like we did about as good as we could. But that day, I look in particular at Phil Campbell, Hackleburg, and I say, a lot of people died, and no, that's not on us. But I think we could have paid more attention, and who knows whether that would have made a difference.
And you've talked about it, and a lot of people, there's not that many so-called well-to-do people in northeastern Mississippi, so you can't really expect them to get on their cell phones or get all this stuff. So it makes it doubly hard in a poorer part of the country to get the word out just outside of television onto Twitter, Facebook, and all the social media.
Well, I will say this, and this is a discussion for a different, how do I put this nicely, for a different forum. People have even the poorer demographics have a lot of smartphones. Most of them have a smartphone. Yeah. Most of them have internet. Not all of it's high-speed internet. Sometimes it's satellite internet. But one of the things that hurt us this year is most of those people, they have their cell phones and they have their satellite TV, and they live in a trailer home doing that. With what happened this time around, the signal got cut to a lot of those folks, and that was, we might talk a little bit more about that here in a minute. But fortunately, in 2011, a lot of those folks actually were streaming us live online, and when they were out of power. So the problem on the demographics has more to do with the lack of storm shelters, the lack of sturdy housing, and that's something that continues to manifest itself. If a good house gets blown away out on a county road, it may or may not be reasonable to rebuild that as normal construction. It might be cheaper to do it as a mobile home, and there's a lot of places where they do that. The percentage of mobile homes in this part of the country continues to increase every year. And most days a mobile home's fine, but you and I know that on those few days a year you have to go someplace else.
And I know, well, we had Dan Threlkeld, who runs the tornado shelter business, and he was on, gosh, what was it, 2 weeks ago, and we talked about this one incident where a storm shelter failed in Arkansas. It was the day before, I think it was the day before the Tupelo tornado.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you'd wonder, now not everybody can afford those storm shelters, and people are building these mobile homes, but then if they're out in the country, they can't really, they would have to go somewhere, and you'd almost have to think, would you want to have to prepare these people to then say, you need to be in your place of safety, wherever it is, at X time?
And I think, and this is one of, someone asked me a while back, about technology, how technology can help us to save more lives. And I would argue that we can save a lot of lives with better radar technology. That's great. But I think the most lives we will save here going forward is the more sociological information that we get. And by that I mean, like understanding how people react to warnings. I'm going to turn on the air conditioner. I usually keep it off up here, so I apologize. There we go. That's a lot better. It's set to like 85, and I'm sweating in my suit. I think the biggest advancements we can make are related to sociological advancements, understanding how people react and and what they react to, and then not abusing that. TV in general, not necessarily weather people, but TV in general is good at figuring out what makes people do certain things and then pushing those buttons over and over again. And so one of the things I try really hard to do is to make sure that, okay, yes, any tornado can kill you if you don't respect it, but make sure that people understand when the threat is greater, because these tornadoes today will stay on the ground longer, they'll be bigger, they'll be stronger, and trying to find an effective way to convey that information so that people know today's a day where you need to go stay with somebody else versus today's a day where if you have to get out and get into a ditch and that's what has to happen, or you don't have to prepare 6 hours in advance, you just have to know when a warning's issued, you need to react. And maybe that's dangerous saying that. Maybe that's dangerous saying that there are shades of gray in a tornado warning. But I think that we have the greatest ability to save more lives by that kind of research that's going on now, that people are working on.
Yeah. And I noticed, and we're going to get up to the April 28th outbreak, that I noticed, along with my co-host who's sick, we noticed during that outbreak that it seemed like every tornado warning was a tornado emergency, and I was thinking, well, why are they overblowing it all the time? Because how many tornado emergencies has Iowa, the entire state of Iowa, had? One. And that was last October, and by the time they issued it, the tornado had already died, which was an EF4.
Now, I'm not sure off the top of my head. Now, here's one of the things where, going back, I've completed some of my, my post on figuring out exactly what's going on. We lacked internet. When Tupelo got hit, internet collapsed. I got so little information that I'm not sure exactly how many tornado and emergencies were issued. But I recently talked to the folks in Jackson extensively. They had to get together and talk to them extensively about their criteria for issuing a tornado emergency. And Jackson would have covered the Winston County and the Louisville EF4. And some of the other tornadoes that happened in Lowndes County, I believe Montgomery County is also Jackson, they would have been included in those. Their criteria for the tornado emergency was unless they had spotter reports with it heading toward a large population center and the likelihood of catastrophic damage and loss of life. And the way they determined that, to a certain extent, was spotter reports and, oh, look, it's heading that way. Part of it was using dual pole data to see the height at which the debris was lofted up in the thunderstorm. I'm trying to think. I think 20,000 feet. Don't quote me on that. I think 20,000 feet was their criteria where they would, without spotter reports, say, we feel legit that this could be catastrophic damage. So, and when they would go to the catastrophic damage tag, that's when it would correlate to tornado emergency.
And they just started using those tags down there this year. They've been used up here the last 2 years, or two. I think it's 2. Are those a lot more helpful in that situation, or are they just annoying?
Prior to this coming out, I might have said annoying. I think I would have said helpful, but I was kind of on the fence. When we lost power, I would get a radar image. There was a point where I had no radar data for about 45 minutes, not a single image. It was it was right after the Tupelo tornado hit. So you had a damaging tornado that just came through this population center and is probably still on the ground. And now I'm basically having to guess where it's at based upon how fast it was moving and where it was going. I would circle on radar where I thought it was, track it, go from there. We eventually got someone at the Weather Service that helped us out, and basically I would ask her questions, okay? And she was a little overwhelmed by the whole situation as well, because what they're doing, she's trying to do 2 or 3 things and help me. And so I would ask her, okay, is tornado warning still in effect for Northeast Lee County? It is? Okay. I would guess the tornado is over Manatee. Would you say that's correct? Yes. Okay, is it still moving 55? Yes. Circle it, track it, go. My reason for saying that is eventually I got a little bit of internet connectivity back, not enough to really run my main system, and I did most of my radar off of my iPhone using Radar Scope. and Apple TV. And I always thought if everything collapsed, I'd have that as a final backup. I never thought we'd actually use it. So pointing all that to come back to the damage tags is when I had so little information to be able to get the damage tag confirmed, catastrophic. Those are things I never read warning texts. That day,
Yeah.
I was reading information from warning texts because I had text data. Takes less data for that text data to get to me than it does for a radar image, so that's the best I could do. So after living through it, saved lives. Absolutely, I believe with all my heart, saved lives. Those damage tags, and I think I always kind of figured they'd be important, but I didn't realize that in that worst case scenario how incredibly important they were.
Yeah, and I was on the fence with them too because I didn't like them, and they're a lot better. The warnings are to the point. They tell you where the storm is. They tell you this is what happens here, 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 and the odd thing is, and I'm talking a lot again.
Yeah, go for it.
And we had, this was a couple of weeks ago now, we had an EF1 tornado in Iowa. It was on the ground for 46 miles. It wasn't detected until the end of the tornado, and then they issued a tornado warning toward the end of its path length. It killed 2 people near the beginning of the path length, which was kind of annoying. But the thing was, you couldn't see the tornado that well because it was in a line and it was a little kink, and that's where the tornado was. And I'd have to go back because there were severe thunderstorm warnings, and I noticed, and I don't know if you've seen it because I think you probably have, on some severe thunderstorm warnings they do put tornado possible on some of them, and we had an outbreak here a couple days ago. We had a couple of them go by because we had a lot of hailstorms a couple of days ago, and one storm, my county where I'm at had 5 severe thunderstorm warnings. One of them, I think it might have been the first one, here comes a funnel cloud that goes by. This was 10 miles to my north. Our tornado threat that day from SPC was 2%, and I'm thinking, why is there a funnel cloud? Because the cloud bases were way too high, because I had seen that. There was only one other funnel cloud report. It's in western Iowa, and the other one was on my side of the state. And the thing that surprised me more about the outbreak here that day, this was earlier in the week, was the amount of hail and the amount of warnings. It was just warning, 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 warning. We had, and I think 3 or 4 of them had tornado possibles on the tags. And the interesting thing I liked about the tags now is they tell you what the hail size is without having to say, what is ping pong ball sized hail or whatever.
And go and looking it up.
That's a lot more helpful. I know on that day we had hail up to the size of baseballs, and I don't think you'd want to put up with that because you already have once.
Yeah. But the thing about the tornado possible, I think it's a good thing.
Yes.
It can be frustrating because, especially, and it's good for those lines, where you get a bow echo and you get the right interactions at just the right spot, and it tries to spin up a tornado. It at least puts out the information that there is, especially for those stations or wherever it is where they stream the whole warning text. I think it's important for those. There's always been this debate, are you putting out that tornado warning because it's a super severe thunderstorm warning, 80, 90 mile an hour winds, or are you putting out the tornado warning because there's interaction that could lead to a tornado that's only 5 miles per hour stronger than the 65 mile per hour winds, or you put it out because it's that long track supercell tornado that's really bad. People at home don't understand the difference, and it's easy to knock the Weather Service. It's really easy to play Monday morning quarterback and say, I wouldn't have done that, or they shouldn't do this. The reality is they're charged with something that's very, very difficult, looking at that one little hook, little appendage, inflow area there, and could that be something, and looking along the entire line and then making the decision, am I going to worry about warning fatigue and issue a tornado warning, and this just ends up being, a rain shower, people go, what's the deal? Or am I going to, put the severe with the tornado tag in it? So that's a process where the sociology is going to help us someday to fully figure it out.
Yeah, and I think of the tornadoes we've had up here, because we've had the last couple of years, we've had a tornado drought. Well, we've had a drought too the last 2 years. Unlike this year where the grass is green, the crops are growing, although the crops are delayed really badly because it's been so cold and we've had so much snow this year up here. But if I'd have to think, because I know the first tornado we had this year was not warned. I don't think there was even yeah, there was a severe thunderstorm warning, but I don't think there was a tornado tag on it. But I'm starting to like the tags a lot more because of that. The hail, the wind is on there, and we read the warnings when we do our severe weather coverage. We only do it and we cover the entire state of Iowa. Can you imagine?
Which is no, it's exhausting. We have some friends here that cover most of Mississippi, and I look at James and I'm like, I don't know how you do it. Like it'll wear you down. It'll wear you down.
Yeah. Then you wonder why I'm losing my hair.
You know, the funny thing, Propecia goes a long way. Not to give them a commercial, but hi. Not to give them a commercial, but it'll all be gone if it weren't for that. Genetics. My dad had less hair than you when he was like 27.
Yeah.
26, 27, and it's just a lot less hair, I should say. You know, and it went very fast. And mine started going when I was on the morning show, and saved my hair.
You'd hope that April 27th, 2011 didn't lose any more, and then you hope that this year you're not going to lose any more from April 28th. And what is this with all these April 27th, 28th?
It was crazy. They dedicated in Smithville, one of the hard hit storms from the tornado, and it hit the high school, destroyed the high school, and so they actually built for the gymnasium one of those domes that's a tornado shelter, so the whole community can go into the dome if there's a tornado, and it seats 1,000+ people, I think. But they were dedicating. I think they were officially dedicating that on the 3-year anniversary on the 27th. Then we turn around to the 28th. There we go. I think part of it has to do with, it's just the perfect jet stream. The Gulf is now fertile enough. It's farther north. If it's going to happen by mid to late April, for here in particular, we can get tornadoes anytime, from September through May. But from that, I think April's just kind of perfect, especially on these years where there's more snowpack north to get the jet stream stronger, farther south. And you get all the good Gulf moisture. I love it. Let me take that back. It makes it interesting.
And I would assume when you saw that the day before on April 27th this year, when Valonia, Arkansas got hit again, which happened right before April 27th, 2011, I'm sure that probably perked up your ears as to wonder, okay, that's interesting.
It did. It was, people here since I've come here, every chance we have storms, they compare it back to the 27th. This is 27th. This is 27th. And every time I have to tell them, no, it's not. 27th was, 40 years between this time and the last time the 27th happened? Anything like that, you have to go back to the super outbreak. So, it's just so widespread, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't take one strong tornado hitting you for it to be a huge day for you. And so we knew it could, we knew a week out it could be a big day. A week out, I was off the Monday before. It happened on a Monday. I was off the Monday before. I came in Tuesday, I was like, good night. What's going on next Monday? And we really, really hit it, and the day before, you get that long, and it didn't take much, but it was that one long track supercell that produced significant tornadoes, and you go, oh God, everything we're thinking could happen. And then the morning of, the crazy thing about it, the morning of, and my wife tells me, she's like, you were a different person that day. She's like, and the only time you were ever like that was on the 27th. We talked on the phone, you're eerie calm, you're like, we got bad tornadoes today. I just want to let you know we're going to be okay. I've done this with the cats, I've done this, I've done that, and I was very calm, and so I did that again that day. I woke her up that morning, And I said, we need to talk about what we're going to do with Penny, our daughter, where you're going to go, when we're going to bring Dana, our nanny, up to the station, and what to do. We need to have a car seat out. We need to have this in the hallway in case they can't get there in time. We need this, and we kind of walked through all the stuff. She's like, it was so weird because you were this very, very direct, very calm, it was just eerie. It's like you were a different person. And that morning about 10 a.m., we knew we were in big trouble. Like, it went from this could happen to this is going to happen, and this is going to be really bad when it happens. And it could be really, and even at that point, I called my boss. I was like, this could be really bad for Tupelo. There was the RPM, which is our in-house, high-resolution model, had one supercell, big supercell, first of the day. At the time it did, track right through Tupelo. Some of the other high-resolution modeling, I think the HER had one that came right through Tupelo. I think one of the other high-resolution WRF models had one that came right through Tupelo. So it was weird to see high-resolution modeling bringing it right through Tupelo. It was very eerie, and then we expected we could have a morning round of thunderstorms. The morning round didn't really materialize, and you go, oh God, this could be really bad. This is going to be really bad. It was crazy.
And it ended up being that it wasn't one cell. It was kind of like a bunch of cells kind of in a line, but it wasn't linear, because if it had been linear, you wouldn't have had a big tornado running around either.
Yeah, and we knew that it was going to start off as multi-cluster and then quickly go, not necessarily multi-cluster, but individual cells, and then take them along the root and the boundary layer and get going. And it was one of those things. It wasn't just the one storm, but it just was so shocking to me that the biggest storm it showed coming through Tupelo, and then it just showed regeneration of discrete storm cells, all afternoon and in the evening, and you knew that. We don't get a whole lot of warm sector, supercells here. We get maybe one day a year where we get warm sector supercells popping up. Most of the time, it's little supercells trying to form on a front, and so the front is triggering them, and they're going. It's not usually warm sector, hit convective temperature, and then we just explode. And that's what it was that day. That's what it was on the 27th of 2011. And the thing and I used to sort of make fun of tornadoes in the South. And it wasn't that I made fun of them, but when you come from when you're in West Texas, and you have the most classic of everything about the stuff in Texas was textbook. The way it looked on radar, the way it was when you were out there taking pictures of it. It was all textbook. And you look at these storms that happen in the Southeast and be like, what, that produced a tornado? I don't know about that. The crazy thing about it is that it's a lot more work, not on a day like the 27th or the 28th, but it's a lot more work on those lower end days to find the tornado, to get them, because you just have such ridiculous shear that they can spin up, a lot more easily. So even if you have 800 cape, you can still get an EF2 or EF3 tornado because you have 250, 300, helicity. It was just crazy. And so that day, knowing that you had your typical shear, that was, and your low-level helicities that were going to be off the chart, plus, oh wait, now we have cape that's 2,300, 2,500 to $3,000. Oh great.
Yeah, and you'd start to wonder, because we'd have capes up here. I think the capes early next week will be about 3,000, but there's going to be no triggering mechanism, so our storms are going to be disorganized. So I'm not concerned. But then when you have this frontal system, you got to I'd go completely frantic, because I've done severe weather coverage where I'm completely the antithesis of the calm Matt. I'm freaking out, especially, and I can go back to, and this is me talking some more again. A couple weeks ago, we were doing our live coverage. My co-host, who's sick and probably watching, and here they said there's a tornado on the ground 10 miles southwest of me, moving northeast. Who do you think is going to get excited? I took this laptop with turned the camera on, and went outside, and then here comes a funnel cloud going by 5 miles to my west, and I'm freaking out even further. I wasn't saying I wasn't pointing and saying go to the basement. I was like pointing at so.
I'll tell you what, and we talked a little bit at the beginning about, it takes time to get to that point. My first chief meteorologist, looked at me and said, when you're doing severe weather coverage, take a deep breath and talk twice as slow as you think you need to. Because if you're upset, if you're nervous, if you're worried, people at home are going to feel the exact same way. And you have to be the rock in that situation. And it takes time. It's taken years for me to get to that point. And I, obviously I got a little, if you've seen some of the other severe weather coverage, I got a little amped up during that coverage, a little more than I usually do. But it's hard when you know that people could be dying. Now, as you speak, this could be the last 3 seconds of someone's life. And in this last 3 seconds, if they take three more steps to get to that closet, they might live through it. It's a hard thing to channel the emotions that go with that. So I wouldn't beat yourself up at all on that. I would just say next time's going to be better. And that's one of the things I always tell our meteorologists is like, and everyone at the station is, next time we're going to be a little bit better at covering this than we were last time, because we're going to learn something from it. And hopefully that'll be a good thing.
Well, I know what I would probably do the next time. I would because I would still have to do the live coverage. I take the computer and go into my closet instead. I did that one time.
That's good, and I think we have an opportunity as weather fanatics, as meteorologists, to set a good example for folks at home. If the example they have, and it's great for ratings, but if the example they have is Reed and his crew driving down the road, driving as close, yelling and screaming and, doing all that stuff, that's not a good example. We need to be a role model for folks that there's nothing wrong with going inside and living through it. There's no need to go take a video. Somebody's going to get a video. You need to go inside and take shelter. And we have a storm chase group that we've worked really closely with here, the North Mississippi Storm Chasers and Spotters. And one of the things I tried emphasizing them early on was like, yeah, it'd be great if you can give me exclusive tornado video, score. Like, I'm all for that. But what I'm much more concerned with is making sure that you get there and help folks out with damage, and obviously the damage video to go along with it, but to help people out with damage, because there's always going to be some, lack of a better term, idiot on their front porch with their cell phone going, look, Ma, it's a tornado. And they're going to have better video than you're ever going to get. You're not going to be in the position because you're not willing to put your life on the line and stand on your front porch videoing it. So worry about the people that are damaged. Worry about the people that are injured. That's where you have a chance to make a difference. Tornado video, it's not all the same, but at the end of the day, it's a whirling cloud doing damage.
And that we bring up the point of, would you, because I believe WTVA only has one Skycam, or how many Skycams do they have?
We have one Skycam, and then we use MDOT cams. We've been working on a Skycam network for 3 years, and had my wife and I not had a baby earlier this year, we'd have Skycam network. It was one of those things I'm like, well, I could build this, or we could go ahead and be there as much as I could for the baby. So I didn't get divorced and decided to help with the baby instead of Skycams.
Yeah, but would that be, because I know that's the future, so you could have more cameras in, say, like West Point or Columbus or Starkville, and
yeah.
So you could say, well, here's a tornado, we can only show you the Tupelo one, but here's 3 other tornadoes and we don't have video of it, and people and James Spann has said this, that looking at a radar is like a spilled paint. Nobody's gonna care about seeing a radar. They're like, oh, look, there's a tornado right in that little red spot. They're not gonna get excited or gonna go to the shelter for looking at a radar and like, well, there's radar, boring.
And now I will say this: James and I are kind of on different sides of the fence on that.
Oh, good.
Because and listen, here's the thing. It all depends on the execution.
Yeah.
I think the radar is important because sometimes it's easy to get caught up in video. And listen, I think that you need to have both. I don't know that they need to be in equal parts, but you need to have a good amount of both. I think sometimes we can spend too much time on a radar image, and there's actually, going back and watch, most of what I see from the coverage I remember, I don't remember, I just happen to go back and watch the coverage, and that's how I remember it. But there's one point in there where I say, now I'm going to be a news director's worst nightmare, we're going to go back to radar. And the reason for that, and I had this argument with the news director that recruited me here, you need to be able to tell people intersections. And maybe the people at home don't get as much out of it, but it makes sure that I'm the most accurate that I can be and that I can get it down to street level. And research has shown that people react when they see the tornado, but they also react when they hear their street name. So you have to make sure that you're doing both. And sometimes you can go a little too far on the showing tornadoes, and sometimes you can go too far on just showing radar. So I think for the confirmation, so people know that it's real deal, that it's important. But I think you have to make sure that you're doing storm tracks so that people are hearing their communities come out, so they're hearing specific intersections. And without doing that, I think we're maybe not just as likely to risk life, but I think if you spend too much time on a tower cam, you know, I've lived in Tupelo for 3 years. Of the tower cam locations that I could have and be able to identify locations, obviously it would be the best. If we put a tower cam in, if we put a camera in Starkville or we put a camera in Columbus, I would have an idea of where I was looking, but I wouldn't know intersection by intersection of town like I know Tupelo because I drive it every day.
Yeah.
And even doing that, going back and rewatching what I was saying, what we said was good and fairly accurate, but not as accurate as if I had just stayed on radar. So should I have just stayed on radar? No. But should I have been more on radar than I was on tower cam? I don't know the answer to that.
Should it have been split screen?
No. And the reason I say it shouldn't be split screen, maybe you had like the tornado picture in picture, like you had the tornado up there in the corner. But you shouldn't split screen it because the city names would be too small split screen. And so if the city names are too small, then the hearing impaired can't read it as well. And obviously we have closed captioning people for the hearing impaired that they're reading along. But they also are looking at the pictures. And if they're looking at the pictures and they see their intersection or they see their city, if it's split screen, then you can't do that quite as well. The reality is I don't know the correct answer to this, but to say just Skycam or primarily Skycam, I don't know that I necessarily agree with that. I think Skycam is vital for confirming the tornado touchdown, but to stay on it, I think sometimes, even as meteorologists, we get enthralled with the images we're looking at and describing those images. And the reality is that pointing at a radar, circling, see that tornado we're just showing you, you circle the location. It's right there right now, meaning it's at this intersection in 5 minutes, not 5 minutes, in 45 seconds. It's at this intersection in 1 minute, this intersection 2 minutes. You know, that's very critical in my opinion. And James and I are on a little bit different sides of that argument, but I think we both mean the same thing by it. You have to confirm it with the tornado, with the camera. It makes a huge deal to get pictures to confirm it. But you definitely can't forget the radar.
And I would assume now with dual pole, now that you can see tornado debris signatures, it makes the radar a bit better off that you can see, well, here's a tornado, there's the debris, and there it goes. And at least we had that with one of our tornadoes this year. We could see the debris.
I think it's critical, especially when you're in that maybe zone. And we spend a lot of our tornado coverage in maybe. I'm really honest with the folks, you know. This is a radar indicated, you know, Doppler radar indicated rotation. It's at this speed at 80 miles per hour. I think maybe it could be a tornado, maybe not. I'm not 100% sure. At 90, let's go with it. You know, at this distance away from the radar screen, let's go with it. And so anytime you can say this is a confirmed tornado, it makes a big difference. And so that's where you hope you have equity with the audience, that they know that I'm not going to jerk their leg around just for any storm, that when we're saying this is really bad, that you take this seriously.
Yeah, so well, we're done with that part, so now we get to the personal stuff.
Okay, I'm gonna try to turn on a light here. So
Yes, I don't think we want to look like you're in some dungeon or something.
it's
I had to turn on my light because it is now sunset.
yeah, that's kind of what happened here. Sunset. We are a little past sunset. So is that any better?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. Okay. And
I look like I'm a ghost now. That's only because the light's right above me. I can still see outside because, of course, I'm way up north, so the sun sets at like 8:15 or 8:10. It's about right now, so.
that's the hardest part about living in Mississippi is the sunset. Not necessarily this time of year, but in winter when the sun's down and like has set and it's like 4 p.m. It's just
Annoying.
in Lubbock. We're on the other end of the time zone, so it's set basically an hour later. And I'm not a morning person, obviously, so it's
So then,
annoying.
yeah, so you're getting to the point where the sun's coming up at like 4:45 or something, or
It's
5
crazy.
o'clock.
And with a new baby, it wakes us up.
Yeah, so now we get to discuss on how you met Emily.
So, funny story. Emily and I worked at the same station. We were in Texas, and I basically, our first date, invited myself out. I was like, "Oh, this is going on. Oh, we should go to that." And so I invited myself on the first date, and she was at the time she was a reporter, and then eventually for a while we anchored together on a morning show there at Texas at KAMC, the ABC station there in Lubbock. And so we anchored for about a little less than 6 months together before I became chief at one of the other stations there in town, KLBK. And then we dated for a few years after the fact. And the first time I went viral, and what I figured would be the only time I went viral, was actually when I ended up proposing to her.
Yeah.
And so I joke it's the only romantic thing I've ever done in my life. Basically, I pretended to be the sports guy at the station,
Yeah.
and I did our morning sports. And the thing that most people don't know about our show is we would record sports the night before, and the sports segment would play twice. It would play at 5. Hold on. It sounds like Penny's crying. Sorry, my daughter sounds like she's crying. I think we're okay. Okay, I think we're okay. Sorry about that. The short story is it plays twice. First time we actually played the sports. Second time it was me. So when you look at the video, she has this really weird look, like she's all confused, like looking off camera. It's because the first time it played right, and she's like, "Oh God, they played the wrong video." Like she thought they played the wrong video from the wrong day, and then she's trying to figure out who is that, and then it occurs, "Oh God, that's him. Oh, I know what's happening here." It's like, oh God.
And that was what was that about a year? That was a couple of years before you moved because you'd been married.
That was.
Oh,
2008, I guess. Like that would have been 2000. No, we get married in 2008. I think no, that was 2008.
You're not
that
gonna.
That was 10/9/8 was the date I proposed. It was one of those weird days. So it was 10/9/8. I'm glad I remember that. So it was 2008, and we moved here in early 2011. So it was a little more than A little more than 2 years after the fact.
Yeah. So it seems to have worked out.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's been severe weather season. She should divorce me every year. I swear. It's just I'm not pleasant to deal with for about 3 months straight. All of a sudden, the people who I have taken vows to, to love and to cherish and to honor, I'm pretty much ignoring for clouds in the sky. It's hard. It's hard on her. So it's worked out, but I have to admit I feel very guilty about it.
At least now it's to the time of the year where you can start going back to those now because all you're going to get is the afternoon storms.
Afternoon
90
thunderstorms, 90 degrees. Yeah, I know, right? I looked at the folks at the station. I was like, so 1:30 for weather? Does that sound good? 1 minute, 30 seconds? And one of them's like, no, we have nothing going on. It's 3:30. And the other one's like, yeah, 1:30. Score.
because the weather's except if there's like a tropical system in the Gulf or something.
There's not a lot. We get these little easterly waves that'll produce little pop-up showers and thunderstorms. But I mean, other than tropical systems in the Gulf, we take the summer off. That's one of the weird things about Mississippi. You could have a storm that produces tornadoes for them anytime from September through May. So the only time you really don't have much of a tornado threat outside of tropical systems is the summer. You have so much shear here, it's crazy. So it's unlike in Texas where you had a true severe weather season. Here, you have a severe weather off season, or at least tornado.
And the difference is we have our severe weather season where we're peaking. Well, we're supposed to be peaking, but I can look outside right now and it's clear, and it's been clear for days. I mean, we've had tornadoes in Iowa every month of the year, which is kind of odd, but we had our largest outbreak a couple of years ago, about 9 years ago, in November. We had our outbreak last year in October, which was the largest of the year. We don't have outbreaks in normal times anymore. All the tornado outbreaks we've had, that big ones, have been October, November. We had a big severe weather outbreak a couple years ago in September. It's like, what happened to April, May, June? That's our normal 3 months. No, it's now September, October, November. So we're supposed to talk about tornadoes during football games and whatnot. It's like, ugh.
And let's not even get into the thing that scares me more than anything else. When you're going to have a tornado hit a football stadium full of people in Iowa in October someday, that day's coming. Hopefully, people know what to do when that happens. But the mass casualty situation that is coming.
It did happen. The November outbreak.
Did it really?
The tornado. There was a tornado heading toward Ames, and Iowa State was playing that night.
Okay, I remember
Colorado.
that. Yeah.
And the game hadn't started yet, and people at the stadium, they could see the tornado.
I remember this now.
Okay,
yes.
yeah. That storm went on. That storm produced like 5 tornadoes or something. And so yeah, you kind of remembered it, and it's like, well, yeah. It went west of the stadium by about 3-4 miles. So. And
that's why I instantly didn't remember it, is because the day's coming where it's a high school football game, maybe not college, but high school football game, because there's just so many more opportunities.
Yeah.
And a high school football game doesn't have the people, basically the management of people to tell the people to get in the safe place, to get the shelter, and they can't put people in the concourse underneath. Underneath a metal stadium is not a place you necessarily want to be. The stadium's going to fall down on you.
Or bleachers, which are going to get picked up and tossed.
Exactly. That day's coming, and nothing about what we do scares me more than that. Not overnight tornadoes. That they actually label this part of the country, some of the researchers from downstate, Killer Alley, because more people die in tornadoes in North Mississippi and Tennessee and this part of the country than any place else, back into Missouri and Arkansas. And a lot of that's because we have a lot of nocturnal tornadoes. Outside these huge events, most of our tornadoes occur our severe weather events are at night. But that doesn't scare me nearly as much as that mass casualty situation that's coming. It's statistics. It's a matter of time.
If it's like at a football game or a NASCAR race
NASCAR race is almost even worse, because you think you have people in the infield there. I mean, and you have so many more people in a NASCAR race. You're talking about 100,000 people there. I mean,
it would be noted April 15th, 2011, that outbreak that occurred the Friday before the race at Talladega. So there was almost a tornado there, but you could talk about, let's say you have a tornado. We'll speculate. Let's say here comes big tornado. I don't care what size it is. EF0, EF5. It's heading for, let's say, a game, the Egg Bowl, let's say played at Starkville. How many people in Starkville are going to be paying more attention to the Egg Bowl, Mississippi State, or some tornado coming at them? Because that would be more. I would think they, with it being at Mississippi State, it's a weather school. You'd think, well, they're going to warn the people. How are you going to get all those people? Where are they supposed to go? There's going to be those people that are going to run home or run all over the place. The last thing you want to do is drive somewhere.
Mm-hmm. And
And
that it's scary. The only thing I will say about this area is after the tornadoes. I mean, you go back to Yazoo City. You know, that was what,
yeah.
2010. And this is just me paying attention in the last few years because I didn't pay a whole lot of attention to Mississippi before we moved here because Oklahoma City, Kansas City, Wichita, these are tornado places. You didn't pay attention to what happened here, which was way more substantial than I ever could have imagined. In Alabama and Mississippi and Tennessee. And so, is ADD going to kid me? And I forgot where I was going with this. Oh, so people, because we've had so many outbreaks, are much more weather aware than I anticipated. Much more weather aware here than if you had a tornado come up in Texas. People there are so used to, hey, look, it's 10 miles away. I can see it 10 miles away. I don't have to worry about it. And so they don't react. Whereas people here take the warnings extremely seriously. And so in Lubbock, I felt like there was extreme warning fatigue. Here, people react so extremely that if there's even a chance for tornadoes, there'd be a lot of people that would stay home for that game, from that game, I should say.
Yeah. So, well, we'll get to the shout out portion. If you want to shout out to any website, to anybody, have at it.
Golly, if there's a part of my job I'm not very good at, this is it. I don't. A lot of folks, read, and I do social media, and we do quite a bit with social media. I'm very localized here, so shout outs only really do me a lot of good close to home. So I mean, obviously,
it doesn't matter.
Yeah, obviously, we're on Facebook. Any social media that I'm on, it's WTVA Matt to find me. So it's twitter.com WTVA Matt, facebook.com WTVA Matt. Brand before person. That's always our opinion. Any shout outs. I hadn't even thought about that. Just thanks for having me on. It's great talking with you. It's nice that you do this.
You're always invited to be on all the time because you and I are pretty much the same age.
Are you really?
Yeah, I'm 33.
Oh yeah, so yeah, you're almost exactly. I'll turn 32 in August. Yeah.
I'm old. I need to get out my walking cane.
I know, right? I know.
Yeah.
With these kids, they keep pushing out of state every year. I mean, it reminds you how hard it is to keep up with what we do. Because they're just how proficient they are at it. So it's a testament to our youth. They're really cool.
Now,
really
what do you think the future holds, though?
Not
for you, but I mean, maybe for you and for the science.
I think the warnings will get better worded, and hopefully, the most interesting thing to me is warning technology. We had tornado sirens that failed here in Tupelo, and if you want to talk about something that's really got me irked right now, it's the fact that took the folks here in Tupelo until today to admit that there was a problem with it. And that upsets me because if you can't admit a problem, you can't fix a problem. There's nothing wrong with it. Tornado sirens fail all the time. Should they fail? Considering all things going on, I think it's inevitable that they will fail from time to time. But you have to admit they fail. You have to figure out why they failed. You have to fix it for next time. And I hope that those things happen now that we finally got somebody to admit that 3 weeks later, almost 4 weeks later.
Yeah, it's almost.
Yeah. But I think the way in people get warnings has got to improve. Too many people rely on tornado sirens. And WEA, the way your cell phone pops up and rings. What scares me is that because that's based upon cell phone towers in the county, so meaning if a cell phone tower just barely clips a county that's involved, then people in the range of that cell phone tower get that WEA alert. So they'll be outside of polygons, and they might even be outside counties involved, and they're going to get alerts.
Yeah.
Does that warning fatigue cause people, regardless of weather service issuing warning, it's just alert fatigue. How does that affect? I think a lot of this science and where we go depends on these kind of social science questions, because I think we've pretty well identified what's going to cause a supercell to form, and it's pretty easy to pick out where the tornado could be, but getting people to react appropriately when they're in that warning, that's the challenge, and that's the fun of it.
And I hate to, we might lengthen this even further. The thing that kind of irks me now, and you can rant about sirens for example, but I saw Nova has done all these tornado shows lately with Joplin and the Moore and El Reno. All they talk about is the tornado, 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 tornado. I'm sorry, the warning process, what do you want? 3 days of warning? I mean, you can't, because then people, no. Warning times are getting better, but...
The thing about Moore was moving, what, 15 miles an hour?
15 to 20.
15 to 20. Tornadoes here in Mississippi move 60.
Yeah.
I mean, 50, 55 to 60, because you have your jet stream and the way it is and how rooted it gets, and if it's producing that big long track tornado, you have, I mean, you can say all you want. The reality of Moore is it was bad, but considering all the people impacted, how few people got killed, and then you had all the people that got killed due to flooding, essentially, I'm not talking about the roadways, people in cars. I mean, that's tragic and that's bad, and that's a whole discussion for a different day.
That was the day of El Reno.
Yeah, and so I'm sorry, you're right, that was El Reno, because that was a week later, because everyone, I remember that, drive south. So the thing about Moore, you had them in the basement at the school there and the flooding, and you can only do so much, and if it was your day, it was your day, unfortunately, and you just try to do the best you can to prepare the best you can to get the safest you can. The reality of a tornado is no one ever said that you're going to be safe from a tornado. You're just getting to your safest location.
And you tell people that, I mean, you can't really babysit them, and you say you can't.
You can't make somebody go. You can just you can just give them information. You can tell it as sternly as possible, but I can't pick you up with my fingers and transport you in, to your safe place.
That almost makes it sound like that's probably the next thing you're going to probably say in coverage is, I can't force you, but I mean, this is so. I mean, that's probably the next thing that you're probably going to start saying, because I've seen a lot of your coverage, and there's some jokes in there that I think, like, there's this big tornado on the ground, and you start whipping out a joke, and I don't know if you're being serious or not, but
it's I get the problem when you talk a lot and you're basically having a conversation with yourself. I learned a lot of what I learned on how to talk with a one-person conversation, as silly as it's going to sound, from Craig Ferguson, watching Craig Ferguson. I love watching The Late Late Show. And it's different now than it used to be when it was just him. Now that he has his robot, Jeff, helping him out, and he talks back and forth, he actually has a conversation with someone. But for a long time, he had a one-person conversation. And the danger in that for me, and like I said, I learned from each time, and there are times I shouldn't probably whip out a joke, and I have in the past, or it's something that sounds kind of like a joke, is it's trying to break up the pace. It's trying to keep people interested in paying attention. And if I'm not afraid to look like an idiot, if it's going to make that one extra person go to their safe place. And there have been things I would take back from. There was one in Sugarlock. I'm trying to remember what I said in Sugarlock about, dodging hailstones or something like.
Yeah, that's it. That's what I was talking about. Why would they? If you're 2 or 3, you might think, yay! That's what you said.
I watched that. I went back and watched that, and I just slapped my forehead. I'm like, what an idiot! Like, why in God's name did that fall out of my mouth? It's so like I say, there's no perfect severe weather coverage.
And there was a big tornado at the time on the ground.
There was a huge tornado at the time. It was one of those moments where you look at it and it's slip of the tongue. I mean, and you feel like when you're talking by yourself, you feel like no one's listening. And in reality, there's a lot of people at home watching and listening. A lot of people. I'm trying to remember. we got the numbers back from the tornado day this time around, and in previous tornadoes, you have hundreds of thousands of people, listening. But when you're the only one talking and no one else is talking, you think no one's listening. And when you think no one's listening, you say things that you normally wouldn't say. And that's, I think, what happened in that scenario there. And that's hopefully a lesson to other people. It was certainly a lesson to me of things I shouldn't say. Shockingly, I got no backlash from it. But after the fact, I figured I would get some backlash from that, But it's, you live and you learn. That one was like, you know what they say about professional athletes. They don't remember the wins; they remember the losses, and that was definitely a loss in that event.
Yeah. And the thing was, it was funny because I always watched the Sugarlock thing from that. Sometimes I'll like, I'll put this on and I'll eat dinner. I'll watch tornado coverage. I'm like completely nerdy or something. So
I've been there.
And I'd wonder, because I know you put a lot of your coverage on there. Do you think you're going to put on the coverage from this past April?
We will. I just downloaded off of our encoder earlier this week. So the first time I've seen some of it, and my phone's about to die, just so you know. I'm at like 5%.
Yeah, we're going to be done soon.
Okay. I'll put some up here pretty soon. I want to get the high quality stuff, and the high quality stuff they have behind the scenes. We've just been so swamped with putting on a tornado relief telethon. And I will say that if you go to our website, WTVA.com, talking about shout outs, if you want to help out, there's a link for Northeast Mississippi Tornado Relief where it goes to the Create Foundation, which is kind of, it's a very localized kind of United Way sort of nonprofit that they have here, and they're working to spread that money. So if you go to WTVA.com, click on tornado relief, you can help out there. But they've been putting on that telethon and doing a lot of other things, so we just haven't got the high quality stuff ingested yet. So I wanted to put that on as opposed to the low quality, but we'll get that up soon.
Okay. Well, before your phone dies, I'm going to thank you for being on for over an hour and a half now.
Yeah, sorry. As you notice, I'm a talker.
Night, so, but you're always open to come back on. I don't want to have to email 60,000 times.
Oh, I apologize. It's the only way to get my attention sometimes.
Yeah. So, thanks for joining us, or me, or whatever. So.
Yeah. All of us watching.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Hey, take care. Have a good one.
Okay, you too.
Okay, bye.
Bye. And that was Matt Laban. We didn't even actually tell him who he was, but so the only email that I received was a comment. Said I talk too much. As you can see, I finally found a guest that talked a whole heck of a lot more than I did. So, but you can contact us at info@iawx.net. That's info@iawx.net. That goes to our co-host who is sick and is probably watching and is probably going and doing this right now. So, but you can follow me on Twitter at iowx.com. I'm also on the Facebook at iowx. Just do facebook.com/iowx, and I am there too. So until next Friday, when we're going to have Mike Cox on, who's from Bristol, Tennessee, or Bristol, Virginia, or somewhere in the Tri-Cities, does weather on the radio, so we're going to have him on. We don't have a guest for June 6th. I am trying my hardest to find one. I know on June 20th we have Dan Goff from the University of South Carolina, and July 11th, Dr. Bill Gallus from Iowa State will be joining us. So this has been the Polygon. Actually, it's Polygon. The show all about weather, all within a box. We do this every Friday at 7 o'clock, and we hope we're not going to have episodes this long all the time. So until next Friday, I am the only host, Jeff Wilcox. Thank you, God bless, have a good Memorial Day weekend, and goodbye.